You're listening to episode 13 of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide podcast. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, the podcast that encourages you to stop dreaming and start doing. I'm your host, Darlene. So in this week's episode, I get to speak with Janet Fouts, who is the author of the book, Mindful Social Marketing, and the owner of Tattoo Digital Media. And our conversation is all about being mindful and authentic in the social media world. And although it's centered around social media, the whole entire conversation can be summed up in that it provides tips and insight on how to be a better communicator and a better listener. Here is my conversation with Janet Fouts. Today I have with me Janet Fouts, who is the author of Mindful Social Marketing, How Authenticity and Generosity Are Transforming Marketing. And she's also the owner of the digital marketing company, Tattoo Digital Media. Janet, thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome to the show.
Hey, my pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about your business.
Tattoo Digital Media is a social media marketing agency based in San Jose, California. And we've been doing this since 1996. We've been managing online communities for our clients and e-learning. And now we are a social media management company. And what I do with that is consulting and helping people put together strategies for businesses large and small and nonprofits and huge corporations. So I work with a lot of different groups, and I have a really fantastic team who helps to manage those accounts. So we all work together and have a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, how did you start the business?
I actually started the business working as a chef in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my cohort in the restaurant, it was Square One in San Francisco, was a banquet chef named Gary Epting. And Gary was an amazing artist and writer, and we started talking about how there needed to be a community for restaurant people in the industry that, you know, we could be that kind of the back of the house thing. So we started the community. We got venture funding, and we ran it for, until 2000. And then we really morphed it into a web development company, and it's moved forward from there.
That is awesome. I love knowing that you used to be a chef, as you said, right? Yeah. Yeah. I love it. What's your favorite dish of all time?
Oh my! You know, I have a thing for foie gras, so it's a guilty pleasure, but I'm very into that particular dish, but I eat pretty much everything. I just love food. It's a lot more fun now that I'm not cooking it professionally.
Okay, so what do you think about people that tweet and post and share their meals?
You know, I do it. Saying I'm having a peanut butter sandwich for lunch today is pretty boring. I certainly want you to have a lot more to say than that. I think the problem that people run into with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is that sometimes they feel like they just have to say something, and that's not true. You know, if you have some insight into your life once in a while, that's great, but if that's all you talk about, you're boring us. Don't do that.
Right. Awesome. Well, today we're going to dive into the social media aspect of business and marketing, and I think it will be very useful to the show's listeners. I wanted to start with, I mentioned the title of your book, Mindful Social Marketing, and it's about how being authentic and generous in your marketing. When we say mindfulness, what do you mean by that, and what does being mindful have to do with social media?
Well, the idea of mindfulness confuses a lot of people because they think that it means, you know, meditation and doing yoga and all these things, which certainly do help it, but aren't a requirement. Being mindful is really about being right here, right now, where you and I are having a conversation and being present in this conversation and not doing things like answering emails while we're talking, for example. So really, as far as social media marketing goes, it's all about being present and paying attention, listening, having an intention for how you want to communicate with people, and then following through with that.
Right. You know, a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, where I'll just go on Twitter and I'll tweet out some information, a blog post or something I find useful, and I'll make a comment on it, but then people might like it or respond, and maybe I'm just, for lack of a better word, too busy to go on there, and it's not being mindful. Like, I'm sharing something and then people are responding, and it's kind of like letting go of the ball there, and not having that presence of mind to be in that moment to respond.
Yeah, and I think, our responses tend to be less focused if we're not fully present when we write them. If we're doing a bunch of things and we go, I'll just toss this off really quick. Well, the end recipient can see that. They know that you weren't really paying attention when you wrote it. And what does that say to them?
Right.
So, it's really important to be present, paying attention, and actually care about the people that are going to read whatever it is that you post.
Right, exactly. And caring actually has a lot to do with the next question about being authentic. And being authentic, I feel, and this is just a personal opinion, is that if you're authentic, you do care because you're putting that authentic purpose forward. But when you say authentic, people kind of get confused and they're like, well, what do you mean by that? Or how can that even apply to my service-oriented business? Why is that important to business and a brand?
Well, the thing is whether you're building your personal brand or you're building a brand for a business or even a corporate entity, you really want to be walking your talk. You want people to come across you wherever they find you and say, wow, I think I know what that person is about. I know what their ethics are. I know what they believe in. I feel that, I have some kinship with them because we agree about some things. But if you suddenly find that somebody is completely just putting it out there to look good, then you get a completely different feeling. And generally people will turn against you pretty quickly when they find that you're not being real. And it's actually more work to be inauthentic than it is to be authentic. So why don't we just do it right in the first place?
Right. Well, what are some things or some ways that we can take a more authentic approach to social media and maybe even stretch it out to marketing and business in general?
Well, there are a lot of classic examples to that. Bank of America, for example, had an incident where there was a protester who was being arrested basically on the steps of their bank because he was occupying the area. And he sent out some tweets about, his struggle with the bank. And the bank responded with canned responses that were all very funny when you took them in context. And they really ended up looking stupid. And it's a classic thing, We think that we can do canned responses to things. And yes, there are things that you want to say that you want to make sure get in there. But you need to be in the room paying attention when you respond to something, not just clicking a button.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Take that further. So, the canned response, like you said, can go out, but make it personable. Make it to that person's situation. And I think part of it, and maybe you agree or don't agree, is to empathize and be in the mindset of the people that you're doing business with too, and that helps.
Absolutely. Having empathy and compassion for the people that you're communicating with just makes sense. We all like to realize that the people that we're talking to care about us and actually listen to what we have to say before they respond. We also want to understand that, brands today give a lot more attention to what individual people say. And so while, I'm not supporting canned responses, I am supporting scripts when this happens, then we need to make sure you get this part of the script into your response. But you should still create a custom response to every situation and every person that you respond to, which is hard. It's not easy.
No, it's not. Do you have any thoughts or ideas of how to do that? Like, let's take it in steps. So let's say 3 steps. What are the 3 most important steps to responding to a situation, but a situation similar where someone has to respond to an issue at hand? They have the canned responses, but if they decide, well, I listened to that interview with Darlene and Janet, and I want to be more mindful in my approach, what are 3 things that they can do to assess the situation and then respond?
Well, there's several things. The first one is, of course, to listen. Actually paying attention to what the person said to you before you respond to it so that you know that you're responding appropriately. The other thing is that we tend to, if somebody says something negative about our business, for example, we tend to react immediately with kind of a knee-jerk, angry response or defensive response. But if we take just 30 seconds and take a breath and then reread it, we'll possibly respond very differently and in a way that's more compassionate. If somebody's complaining about your product, they may have a very good reason to complain about your product. And if that's the case, you want to validate that and say, wow, that is a valid concern, and we're looking into that, rather than getting mad at them and telling them off, which doesn't help anybody.
Right.
So, we need to be cognizant of that. And lastly, we need to be cognizant of what the effect of our communication with this person is. Clearly, sometimes people are trolls, and we know that they're just trying to stir things up. But a lot of times it's something that, is a real issue for someone. So, validate that issue and say, hey, let's talk about this. Can we have a phone call? Can, we take it to email? How can you help this person? And at the same time, you look better to your social network that's following you because they go, wow, that's really cool. They dealt with this person instead of being a jerk about it.
Right. Awesome. I could just tell from listening to you that you are passionate about being mindful and in social media and being in the moment. So this is probably a loaded question, so it's probably hard for you to even pick one. But what do you love about social media marketing and business? Well,
to me, social media marketing is a natural transition from the way we used to do small business. There used to be, you'd go to the hardware store and the guy knew everything about you. He knew what you liked. He knew what products you liked. He would solve your problems. And we've gotten away from that. But social media allows us to go back to that, to actually have conversations one-on-one with clients and communicate with them, human to human. So it's a much more warm and fuzzy way to do it.
Yeah, for new entrepreneurs where they're just like, well, I know I need social media. I know I need Twitter. I know I need this. All right, I know I need to be on it somewhere. They're probably thinking, well, how do I even communicate and form that, that local mindset with my customers if I only have 140 characters, for example, to do so? Any suggestions there?
Well, I think it's really important that people pay attention to how they like to communicate best. You don't have to be on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or any social network if it's not a good fit for you. So you really have to think, do you want to blog, for example? Do you have a lot to say? Can you say that in video or in a podcast like this? What is your method of communication? And once you start focusing on that first, that helps you a lot to understand what social networks are going to be a good fit for you and what's going to work best for you.
Right. Along those lines, what is most misunderstood or misused when it comes to social media?
I think it's that everybody has a different network that they need to be on. And I think a lot of people will say, well, you have to be on my favorite network, or you have to be on all the social media networks. Well, even I can't do that. So don't feel pushed into a network if it doesn't work for you. I think that's the biggest thing that I can tell people.
Yeah. To further this conversation even more and taking into consideration people that are just starting out and they've maybe honed in on what networks they don't want to be on. Mm-hmm. What one piece of advice or tool would you share with them to take that next step in their social media marketing?
The first thing I would suggest is that you go to some of the popular search tools. There are a lot of them out there. I like BuzzSumo as a great search tool that searches across multiple platforms. And start putting in some of the keywords that you want to talk about. If you're a car dealer, then maybe you want to talk about car sales. Then start doing some searches on that. Then drill that down. If you want it to be local, then add local. But start drilling down to where people are having conversations that you feel you can engage in and that you can talk to. And then once you kind of get that together, you can say, okay, this network and that network are good for me. That one's kind of a waste of time. Maybe I'll grow into it later. And, take that across how you want to communicate. And that'll help you a lot drill down to the networks that are really going to work for you.
Right. And so BuzzSumo is a search engine for, like a search tool for all of the social networks? Is that?
Yep, it searches across social networks. Another really good one is called socialmention.com. And Social Mention is great because it searches everything, blogs, images, all of the different social networks. So you can get a lot more information from that about where people are having conversations. And you can also find people that you want to connect with and actually want to have a conversation with.
Right. Well, before I wrap up, I wanted to bring it back around to being mindful and social media. Are there any final takeaways or, this is what you want to leave with the person that's listening to this today about mindfulness and social media?
I think that what I want to leave people with is this. Mindfulness is a wonderful way to live your life. Being mindful of others and respectful of others, being compassionate and listening actively rather than passively and doing other things, being present right here in this moment is the most important thing that you can do. So why wouldn't you carry that into the way that you market your business and talk to the people that you want to work with?
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, Janet, for being a guest. And for people that want to learn more about you and also find your newest book, where can they go to do that?
The book, Mindful Social Marketing, is available on Amazon, and you can also find links to it on my website, mindfulsocialmarketing.com.
Thank you, Janet, so much for being a guest on this podcast. You can find a link to Janet's website as well as a link to the tools mentioned in this episode at dvpodcasts.com in episode 13's show notes. And I want to connect with you. So I would love to hear your feedback, your guest suggestions, or if you want to be a guest on the show, you can send me an email, darlene@darlenevictoria.com, or you can head over to dvpodcasts.com and locate the contact form. You can also connect with me on Twitter. I'd love to chat with you there. My ID is Darlene Victoria. And finally, you can sign up for the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide email list. All new subscribers get a special goodie, a free copy of my ebook, The Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, a guide to living and growing successfully. So those are some ways to keep in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you and start a conversation. Well, that does it for another episode of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide podcast. I'll be back next month. Thanks for listening. This is Darlene Victoria, signing out.